Back in February, Hamit Coskun stood alone outside the Turkish consulate in London and set fire to a Quran. He shouted, "F Islam," that Islam is a religion of terrorism, while holding up the flaming book. He was there, he said, to protest against the Islamist government of Erdogan in Turkey. While he was doing that, as you heard in that clip, another man came out of a building armed with a bread knife and set about attacking Mr. Coskun. Musa Kadri avoided prison for the attack, receiving a 20-week sentence suspended for 18 months. Mr. Coskun was found guilty of the crime of a religiously aggravated public order offence. But today, in the High Court, a judge quashed that conviction. Do you think this conviction should have been quashed?
I think that when it comes to freedom of speech, it's a cornerstone of democracy, but it isn't absolute, and it comes with limits. And when that free speech is deliberately targeting and inflaming hatred against others, like burning the Quran outside a consulate, it wasn't a neutral act of political expression. It was actually calculated provocation against Muslims designed to humiliate and divide. I don't actually condone either the person that actually burnt the Quran nor the person that tried to attack him for doing so. I do think the original conviction was right because of the law. It recognises that words and symbols can be weapons under the Public Order Act and the Criminal Disorder Act. But if the conduct is motivated by hostility towards a religion and causes alarm and distress, it is a criminal act. We've seen this happen in Europe. And actually, this kind of thing was considered criminal. And by overturning this conviction, the court now has upheld a legal principle. It risks sending a dangerous message that targeting faith groups under the banner of free speech is consequence-free. And that undermines the social cohesion, public safety, and the very values our justice system is meant to protect.
The judge said here, the right to freedom of expression, if it is a right worth having, must include rights to express views that offend, shock, and disturb. A protest outside someone's home or place of worship may well create an anticipation in those who witness it feeling vulnerable and very easily feel harassment, alarm or distress. Outside a secure location recognised for such activity, less so. So this case relies very heavily on its specifics. This was outside this particular building at this particular time. It was one person. There were people who gathered around him to watch. They clearly didn't feel threatened enough to run away. And when the judge says burning the Quran may be an act many Muslims find desperately upsetting and offensive, the criminal law is not a mechanism that seeks to avoid people being upset, even grievously upset. He's right.
Yes, I'm not talking about it being upset. And I just think that if someone burned the Torah outside the Israeli embassy, for example, no one will call it free speech. It would be instantly treated as anti-Semitic hate, and it would be treated differently. And I think there's a double standard that should apply, that is being applied, to be honest. I mean, I don't disagree.
Well, where's the evidence that has happened to show it's a double standard?
Well, I think when we're talking about the Palestinian marches and people are inciting whatever they're inciting, and it's being deemed as hate and it's been deemed as anti-Semitic,
yes,
and it's
absolutely
been, put forward as in it should be banned, then it's the same thing.
No, I'm sorry, it isn't. The idea of showing support for a prescribed terrorist organisation is an illegal act in this country.
No, they're not all showing support for a terrorist
I didn't say that they were.
There are also different groups who are also chanting, and it's also free speech to chant whatever
absolutely.
you want to chant.
And those people who have chanted from the river to the sea have not been arrested and charged and prosecuted for chanting to the river from the river to the sea.
I understand that, but there's still calls for it to be. Do you understand?
But they haven't been.
You can argue that it should be, and there has been programs when I've watched where you've actually argued to say that is anti-Semitic, it shouldn't be allowed. So it's the same principle, but I think different groups are treated differently with less compassion, less understanding, and less kind of, ways in which, it should be put forward.
So what is the crime that this man has committed?
Well, it's like I said, the full detail of the appeal judgment is not yet publicly available.
It's out there. The judge's expression is already there.
Yes, I get that. But the crime, again, is, of course, we've seen that, law can be argued and it can be, discussed and also put forward in different ways. The law is very much depending on how you can put
okay, so let me ask the question differently, because that's fair. Yes, it can be interpreted in different ways.
Yes.
What crime do you believe this man has committed?
I think it's about exactly what the public law order comes under, where it's disruption, incitement, and it is hate, and it actually is also in response to actually demonizing a particular group and also causing division. And it is actually, I would say, incitement. It does cause, because like I said, in Europe, we've had exactly the same cases where the Quran was being burned, and it actually did cause riots. It did actually even cause where they were convicted and they were maybe not put into prison, but actually being called to have a fine and being criminal, so that at the end of the day, it just makes sure that everyone that's living, basically in a way where there's not going to cause that sort of, extremism on any side, just like how we wouldn't want people going out there with Nazi salutes and chants.
If someone took just final question, because this is very context specific, if someone took the Quran, put it in a bin outside in their back garden and set fire to it, should that be a crime?
No, because under the public law order, it is in private. This was in public. So I do understand when it comes to, certain things in which the law states that it is actually there to cause a public
So it's a public order offence. It doesn't have to be religiously motivated, which is what the original offence has been quashed.
No, it's nothing to do with religion.
Well, that's
in fact, it shouldn't be religion. It should really be about a public order.
But Fahima, that's what he was convicted of. He was convicted of a religiously aggravated public order offence. Yes, but you disagree with that.
It was the wrong conviction in the first place. It should be public order, and that's why I said the law is interpreted differently, and there's different people that would actually basically be a barrister or a solicitor that would be much more experienced to do that. That's why we see different cases thinking that it's actually two-tier when it's not two-tier. I actually respect the law, and I think that is actually due process. And I think that the way in which that people, put forward certain cases is what we need to understand how the law acts and works. So that's why we should not argue that it's two-tier. I respect the way it's been done, but I do believe that it, it can be overturned again if it wanted to with a different kind of, put forward a conviction. And that's how I see it as being. And that's what law is about.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. Fahima Mahomed is a broadcaster, freelance journalist, written in publications like Al-Islam. Andrew Copson joins us, Chief Executive of Humanists UK. Thank you for coming on the programme. It's a pretty odd, weird thing to do, isn't it? To stand in public, burn a book, shouting F off, whatever. That could be seen as a public order offence, could it not? Afternoon.
It's afternoon. It's certainly weird. People do a lot of weird things. The question is not whether people are allowed to do weird things in public. They are. The question is whether they're disorderly. That act that you've described could in some contexts be disorderly. I can see how it would be. But I think in this case it was not, because of the specific facts and context of the case. And so I think that the judges were right to grant the appeal.
Which specific parts of this case do you think means that it isn't a public order offence?
Well, I think that the 6 or 7 that the judges laid out very well. First of all, he was alone. Second of all, the embassy is obviously a site of free expression. People politically protest at embassies, outside embassies, and that is seen as legitimate. The many people passed by without offence, without the causing of disorder. He was alone. It was daylight. I mean, many factors go towards the context of this not being disorderly. I think it's also good that the judges drew attention to the fact that one of the things they had to consider in coming to their conclusions was the human right to free expression that does exist.
Yeah.
I mean, no laws have to be read compatibly with each other. We have the right to freedom of expression in this country, subject to our not being allowed to harm others. The law seeks to strike a balance between harm, which includes disorder, and our right to freedom of expression. And I think in this specific case, the appeal judges got it right.
The thing for me, there might be an argument about whether this was a public order offence. The wording for me that I've always found slightly odd was that it was a religiously aggravated public order offence. Because it is, I think, in a free country where we have liberal democracy and what have you, it is okay for people not to like others' religions.
Absolutely, that's right. And I think the Crown Prosecution Service got this really, really, really wrong. They got it wrong the first time around in the first charge that they preferred, which was even worse, which had to do with the insulting of the institution of Islam. They withdrew, of course, that charge and then substituted this second charge, still with the religious element.
Sorry, Andrew, is that an actual charge? Can someone be charged?
Well, it shouldn't be, but it was the first charge that they preferred, and then they withdrew it quite rightly and substituted this. And it's not only wrong in principle for them to do that, for them to have done that, for them to have brought religion into this without any incitement to hatred or violence against religious people having been implied. It's not only wrong in principle, I think it was circumventing the will of Parliament, because 20 years ago, when the crime of incitement to religious hatred was included for the first time in the Public Order Act, Parliament included it but made really clear that they never wanted to see anybody prosecuted for political protest, for just criticism, for artistic expression, and so on and so forth. And the Crown Prosecution Service, instead of using that crime of incitement to religious hatred, which would have come subject to those defences that Parliament insisted on, went around it to try and get this other charge of some religious aggravation. And I think in doing that, they were not only making a very bad decision which had the potential to chill freedom of expression, they were circumventing the will of Parliament, which is unacceptable. So that's another reason why I think this judgment on appeal is completely correct.